just that piece about making sure that you as the go-to person have someone to go to in your life is also probably another facet for having the good life, because the thing is, like I mentioned earlier in the conversation, like, hey, we're social creatures. Yeah, we like our silence and boredom. We don't want to be around other people at times, especially if you recharge by yourself, but you still need other people.
Yeah, welcome back to Good for the Hive, the podcast where I get to sit down with some inspiring guests to share their life lessons and take a look at the question, what is a good life? Today's guest, Dom Brightmon, is a best-selling author, a certified trainer, and a positive thought catalyst. Don't worry, that's like the second question I ask him. Dom is also the host of the Going North podcast. We talk all about Dom's mission to speak to 1,000 authors on his podcast, how some of his favorite interviews have gone, and how he manages to stay so goddamn positive all the time. If you enjoyed the episode, please do give it a like and share. And if you're new around here, do subscribe. All the new likes and subs help us to continue to grow and attract inspiring guests just like Dom. Let's jump into the episode. Dom Brightmon, welcome to the podcast.
Woohoo! Thank you, Alex. I appreciate you, my man. Feel good to be a bee with you in the hive.
I like that. Might have to steal that. Dom, I really want to pick your brains, just like you've picked the brains of, it was 800 authors, but now you've done over 900 podcasts. So does that mean it's over 900 authors now?
Yep, it's over 900. Shoot, I probably got I think 40 more in the queue. So I'm about to reach my goal of 1,000 authors across the globe.
Fantastic. I'm going to dig into that a little bit later. But first of all, let's start where we start all of these podcasts and ask you, what is a good life to you?
A good life to me is growth. One word is growth. And it doesn't always have to be explosive growth where it's like, all right, cool, started this company. 5 years later, it's like $50 million or like viral across the globe. Like it could be as simple as like one day you're feeling the best shape of your life, and then 3 months later, after let's say gaining a COVID-21, as some would say, but you're lost at least a good 15 of those 21 that you gained. Like just small incremental changes that really help you to be the best that you can be. And heck, even growth in relationships, like new friends, like deeper levels and layers of family. Like even now with my current situation where helping to take care of my elderly mother who's in her 80s now, and just learning more about her and her past, some things I've never even thought I would even hear 20 years ago. So all in all, I have to say it will be growth.
Mm-hmm. And if we were to go back and ask 18-year-old Dom what you think you would be doing right now, what did you what was your plan when you were 18? Did you always want to be an author? Was that a goal even back then?
Oh, the funny thing is, that wasn't even on my radar at all, because I almost failed English in high school, man. Like, some of my tests would come back looking like somebody stabbed it like 10 times. And even one of my classmates saw one of my tests, especially in my freshman year, and was like, man, Dom, your paper bloody, man. Who stabbed your paper, man? Because there were so many red marks everywhere. So author wasn't even on my radar at all. Funny enough, I thought I would be doing computer repair in the IT world and going deep into that, and maybe even being a preacher on the side at a local church, probably. But that wasn't,
really?
author wasn't even, yeah, because I originally went to school for IT to really jump into the IT world, because we had a computer technician come and fix one of our computers at home, like when I was early preteens, like I think it was like 10 or 11. And it was a cool, chill dude, and computer worked fine. I'm like, okay, this is a guy who fixes stuff. I want to be a guy who fixes things. I want to be a problem solver. And that just popped in my head as an idea. But got my degree, went for a certification, was a couple points off, and was about to go for it again, and ended up getting promoted at a local library to a full-time employee. Got a bunch of benefits and kind of enjoyed the library world more than the IT world. So basically stayed there. And the beautiful thing about libraries is that there are so many tools depending on where you are in the world, in a library where it's not just information sanctuary full of books. Like there's folks you can meet. It's a great place for families, for friends. A lot of entrepreneurs use the open dedicated spaces where you can just book a free study room or something like that. Heck, even with some libraries, they even offered free internet via Wi-Fi hotspots, Chromebooks, and things like that. And just the amazing things that are done there. So, like at 18, Don would be surprised that he later became an author and a speaker and a podcast host because those things weren't even on my radar. I didn't even know what the hell a podcast was. I think it was like 2009 when I turned 18. So yeah.
Mm. And only 5 years later, author. But before we delve into that, so you describe yourself as a positive thought catalyst. Can you pick into that a little bit and explain what you mean by that?
Yes, a positive thought catalyst is someone who inspires positive thoughts within others. It could be positive thoughts about the situation where they reframe it, or more positively about themselves. And the thing is, if you're living and breathing, you need encouragement, especially yourself when, like, whoever's listening right now, because we can be our own worst critics of all time. Like you could probably grab the worst critic. It's like it's like all of the media, well, not all of them, but a lot of the media pundits on Lamar Jackson because of his playoff record. Like I'm sure Lamar himself probably has a whole lot of other self-talk he has to deal with to keep himself at a higher level to be a MVP level quarterback and try to reach his goal of getting a Super Bowl. Like there, heck, even myself, like I can be my own worst critic, especially when it comes to just about anything. It's like, oh, this episode wasn't good. And then a listener says, man, this is your best episode ever. I'm like, dude, I had a cold during that recording. Actually like that one. I'm surprised I even put it out. Like we can be our own worst critics, and we all need encouragement and reminders of not only our past success, but also what we currently are, what we can truly do, and what we can also do in the future. So a positive thought catalyst is someone who helps others invoke positive thoughts about themselves and their surroundings, being able to find the good within yourself and other people and your environment.
And did that always come naturally to you, or have you had to work on that over the years?
I definitely had to work on that over the years. I've had flashes of it, especially one of my friends noticed it like when I was in high school watching a wrestling show. I think it was SmackDown, and it was one of the matches, and I forgot what exactly happened. Like it was just a short, quick match, and I don't know what happened. But man was like, man, that's you. You can always find something good in something, man. Like that match was trash. It was like 30 seconds. Like they got trashed, man, and you actually found something positive in that, and just flashes of that to where eventually I picked up books by Brian Tracy and John Maxwell and a bunch of others to help shape my thinking and to really work that positive muscle. Because the thing is, it's really a muscle because at the end of the day, we're all human. No one's perfect. You're not going to be on 24/7. You're going to have to give yourself rest and heck, even also maybe even apply some great prep work like one of your past guests, Amy, who's freaking awesome. I loved her
Mm-hmm.
episode on the show.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, like, you have to need reminders. So helping myself to really stay positive, I keep affirmations all around my workstation. Like, hey, one of the best things that I have up here is that be the best active listener in the room. Because the thing is, you learn more by listening. And with me being a podcast host, that's an interview based show where I rarely do a solo episode. Like, hey, I have to be an active listener and also do a little background research on my guest and try to get something new out of them. Because long form content, like this wonderful show right here, being a good Hive bee with you, you really have to try to get something new out of someone who may be experienced, especially big time guests, because sometimes they may not share their episode after the episode is over. But hey, they may get something new. Like even one past episode where I interviewed Kelly Swanson, and she's a Christian, and I talked to her about her faith journey, and she's never talked about that on a podcast at all. It was all about her expertise all the time. But when faith was brought up, that was a whole different conversation. Heck, even got another quote up here that says, "Be a better person than I was yesterday." And that goes back to the good life being about growth. It
Mm.
doesn't have to be a big win. Sometimes it can be a smaller win. Like, hey, it could be getting $30 back from the bank because they said, "Oh, we charged an overdraft fee when we weren't supposed to do that, buddy. Like, here's some money back for you. Should we put that back in your account?" Like small things, small wins, man.
Mm.
Small things can lead to big things.
And one of your mottos is advance others to advance yourself. Is that something you've learned through trial and error? Is that something you were always good at, or is that something that you tried out and you've just seen some benefits from that? Because I'm seeing that all over the place. Even one of the first people to actually say it and get through to me was Mr. Beast. When he was coming up on YouTube, he would say you can look at things like everyone's a competitor and there's a small pie and it's sort of like there's only so many views to go around. Or you can think within your clique, within your sort of generation, this person's learning. If I can learn from that person, then we all go up together. And it's like it's a community rather than it's me versus everyone. How did you come to that as your motto, and why is it so powerful for you?
Yes, it's a mix of both, really. Like, because I read a lot and also like to take action after reading certain things. Because one of the major setbacks for those who may read nonfiction books or dive into a bunch of content and really get into that absorption mode is information constipation, where you basically got all this information and you're basically like, hey, you got to let it out eventually, buddy. And one of the books I read was The Science of Getting Rich, and I forgot what exact chapter it was. Might have been chapter 9. It talked about the advancing man personality, where you go into business where you're out and about when instead of promoting yourself and network when you network with others, you look to learn about others, see how you can solve their problems if they have problems to solve, or heck, basically make it all about the other person and not about yourself. And this happened for me when I went down to a friend's communication seminar a few years ago just to support him because hey, it was a week weeknight and a lot of folks weren't going to fight the traffic to get into that certain location. It was like maybe sure 7 people in that room, but network with everybody in that room. One of the guys who attended was a photographer. Handed me his card and checked out his site, and it was really well done. Like it was probably one of the best well done sites I've ever seen for a photographer who does a bunch of other things on top of that. Kept his information, and a year later, interviewed a guest, and she needed a photographer, and the guy's card who I got, he and about 4 other people I recommended, she ended up going with the same guy that I got the card from a year before that interview. And he was so happy that he actually got return business on that. When it came time for me to give my headshots, he gave me a huge discount on my headshots, all because I gave him a referral.
Mm.
And just that small moment, like it really is all about helping others because eventually you'll be able to help yourself as a result from helping other people. Heck, even the late great Zig Ziglar with his famous quote that if you will help enough other people get what they want, you'll eventually get what you want comes to life. So that's really where that advance others to advance yourself quote came from. Just reading a bunch of great materials and following great models of it and actually living it out myself because at the end of the day, we're social creatures. We need each other. Even though there may be a lot of introverts out there who recharge by being alone, you still have to connect and have relationships with other people. And it's always good to help others to advance.
So you set out a while ago with the mission to interview 1,000 authors. What was your fundamental idea behind that? Because obviously, like you say, it will help people. It will help the authors get a little bit of publicity. But more importantly, it will encourage others. But when you initially set out and you started doing your first interviews, what was your underscoring theme that you wanted to give back and put out into the world?
Solid question. My underscoring theme of the show was really just help other people, to be honest. Because when I first started, I really had no exit strategy. In the beginning, it was just a way for me to promote my own book because the podcast itself, it started, I'd say, shoot, September. So 6 months after my dad died, after his long battle with Alzheimer's. And I needed a way to market my book because a few months before my dad passed, I published my first book, got on TV, did all these interviews, and was getting some traction, but also being a part-time caregiver for my dying dad. So had some anticipatory grief, and I thought things would be okay as a transition period once his time was up and he was no longer in pain and the family could take a breather a bit. But there was still some deep grief that I had to take care of, and I just stopped marketing my book and everything like that, and still went to the day job though, still kept that going, but sucked at that. And had a meeting with the boss where she noticed I was like, hey, she was like, hey, you sure you good, buddy? You don't need extra time or anything? Because I was screwing up in certain areas that I usually don't do. And that brought up to the fact that, hey, maybe I need to take some time and get more self aware. And on top of that, my dad was a hardworking man. And one of the major things is that even in his early 80s, he was still lifting heavy boxes for the church's food pantry. Even though he'd be tired as heck afterwards, he would still use his remaining life force when he was still able to think straight and be able to drive on his own to volunteer at his church to help out folks. So I was like, all right, if he was able to do that, let me get back to work. I'm going to get back to work and market this book. Let me start a podcast. That's something I really wanted to do and something that was my original goal before even becoming an author. And as opposed to running my mouth every week into a microphone, I was like, wait a second, let me make this about other people, because if I do, it'll be able to expand not only my network, but help others to get their messages out there, because there are probably, if not millions of authors out there. There's 8 billion people on earth. There's millions of them that are authors. Books are being published every day. And to be able to help folks to expand the gift of the written word and help others to get their feet wet with being interviewed, especially first-time authors, because that was a big thing in the beginning, getting first-time authors on the show, because there are a lot of folks who, especially writers, they're scared of the camera, or they're scared of interviews, and it's like, hey, if they can just have that one moment where someone gives them the chance to see their own gift in action, they'll be able to run for a lifetime. And after episode, I'd say probably close to 200 or so, like, I realized, wait a second, I've been going hard for these past 2 years with this. Like, this could really grow. And I'm like, wait, let me go ahead and interview 1,000 authors. Let's make that the stretch goal. And boy, did it stretch. 7 years later, I'm probably about 50 more folks to go.
And what do you do when you get to 50? So when you get to 1,000?
That's the thing. I'm contemplating taking a break from the show. I might do a party. The only thing is, like, with my current situation, like, we'll see how things go, but definitely gonna celebrate doing something. I really have no major plan with it. I'm one of those guys who stays in the trenches, stays in the weeds, who likes to just do his work and get it done and move on to the next thing, which is not always a good thing. So I'll have to plan a celebration or something.
So sticking with this for a little bit longer, how do you think you've grown from the first author interview to, let's say, the 950th? How have you grown or what skills have you developed across the way? You said active listening. What else have you developed, and how else do you think it's helped you grow?
It's helped me to grow in so many ways, because the thing is, hosting a podcast, it helps you to become a better speaker, but I already had the tools of a communicator before starting a podcast. I did Toastmasters for about a good 3.5 years and gave over 50 talks at that point in Toastmasters, and grew up in church where basically had to do a scripture recital in front of over 1,000 church members when our church was at our peak in terms of membership, and speaking was basically second nature to me. It was basically breathing. Like I wake up, I can I like give me like 5 minutes in front of 1,000 people rather than a 5-page paper back in the day. That's basically me. Heck, that's still probably me to this day, even with AI. Like, dude, give me 5 minutes. I'll have fun with that, dude. Shoot, this comes from a guy who wrote books. Like, yeah, like give me a stage, bro. But the major thing is definitely the confidence behind the mic and being able to transfer the skills of how to do a proper introduction, like making the guest feel at ease. The act of listening, as I mentioned earlier, being basically a researcher and basically changing my preparation style and making sure, like, heck, even if anything, just SEO and better marketing, because one of the major things that folks need to learn, especially when they publish books, is that they have to always market their work, always promote their work. You have to be a huge self promoter. If you want to be a carnival barker, metaphorically, you're going to have to be, because if you have work, and especially if you're in business as a sole entrepreneur, or especially if you have employees, like you have to really put yourself out there. And that's a lesson that I've had to learn, because thing is, like, I'm an introverted guy. Like, yeah, give me a stage, but also I'm naturally not a sales person in a way, like a, let's say, a Grant Cardone, where I'm just gonna like walk up to people like, hey, how's it going? I got this random great car for you. It's not used, it's new. I just need you to lean on the pen for it. Like, I'm not that type of guy. I'm just gonna be like the chill guy in the corner, like the dog meme that's going around. I'm like the chill person. But like the growth between episode 0 and 950, there's just been so many things. Like, even one tool that I still stick with to this day, and that was Sam Liebowitz, who dropped it. I think it was episode, I forgot which number it was, but it was whatever year 2020 was at the end. He had a book called Everyday Awakening. He
Mm.
mentions how with his coaching clients, he would have them have a victory log. So for those who are familiar with gratitude journals and may not be a fan of them, why don't you reframe it as a victory log? Write down your wins for the day. And kind of like how my response to the first question, like, hey, what is the good life? It's about growth. And growth doesn't have to be explosive growth. It doesn't have to be a giant quantum leap. It could be as small as, hey, if you have weight loss goals, lost a pound today, like ate less sugar, drink coffee without sugar and cream, like being able to get to work on time, being able to get a wonderful interview slot with the wonderful Alex today, like being able to track down every single win, write them down for the end of the day, just going back and just looking how your day went, writing down your wins, then 90 days just reflecting on and being like, hey, I got this journal of proof that I'm a winner. And just that's been a confidence booster alone. And that's really what it's about. Because if you want to live the good life and you want that growth, there are going to be times you have to remind yourself of the greatness that's within you and the greatness that you've done and the greatness that awaits your future.
I like that. So you've interviewed over 900 authors now, sticking with the general theme of life lessons rather than the specific skills of how to write a book, how to market a book, how to get that stuff done. What are your favorite life lessons that you've extracted from these 900 people on just how to live life, on good themes that get you through life that are applicable to not just the art of writing books?
Yes, one of the major ones is intuition. Always trust your intuition, your gut. Your gut knows a lot. It may not always cry for food or give your mind the signal to mess with your mind and say, hey, tell the human to feed me. It ain't just that. There may be times where it's like, okay, maybe I should pause for a second before making a big decision. I had a particular guest, and she was overseas, and she was in, I, I, I don't want to say an abusive relationship, because I'm not exactly sure how long it lasted, but there was some stuff going on that wasn't pretty for her, to say the least. And she kept on having this gut decision when she was working out in the gym, like, I don't think I should trust this guy. I don't think I should trust this guy. And it was And her gut instinct was right. And that she was able to reframe that situation and turn it around. And she was able to come out A-OK for it. And she's doing well these days. She's thriving in business, ultra positive personality, but just not listening to her gut instinct while she was overseas in parts of Asia, being a chick who was like ultra fit and taller than most of the folks in the room, lifting heavier weights, definitely made her a target for some folks. And just the fact of intuition, heck, even one of the major things that still sticks out to me to this day is also reinvention. There's going to be times where you have to reinvent yourself. Some, if not every 3 years, subconsciously, sometimes we reinvent ourselves in small ways. Heck, I even look back in my career in a library where I started off as a part-time intern, a youth intern who basically came there a few days a week and didn't do anything stupid and got invited back when I turned 16, and then eventually kept the job through high school and college to the degree, and getting to the full-time position where I became the more confident person, being better at helping out the customers, having role models around me and learning from them and how to be a bit of a showman in a way in places, and especially in a library field where that's not expected, and being able to have the technology edge of helping out folks with digital resumes and being more of a jokester now and telling corny and funny dad jokes on the regular with colleagues and everything like that. Like just the growth. It's just looking back, it's like every 3 years a subtle change has happened. The confidence has grown. There are certain things that would freak me out years ago that don't freak me out today. There's certain situations where it's like, all right, I know how to take care of this situation. This negotiation is going to be an easy one, as opposed to, oh my gosh, I don't even want to talk to this person. Let me go grab a manager. Like, just that, to where it's like the thought of never writing a book, focusing on one thing, to hiring a coach. Like, there's just so many things. Heck, even as an example, even though his name isn't popular these days among wrestling fans, Chris Jericho, a huge reinvention guy, like his ability, at least for a good 20 years of his career, to be able to come in as one thing, start off as Lionheart, get training and experience down in Mexico and Japan, and then come back to the States and become a big star and main event WrestleMania with folks like The Rock and Triple H, to being able to be a rock star, live out his dream as a kid to start a band, and then eventually take it from a cover band to a worldwide sensation with a wonderful song known as Judas, where it just sounds so great, gets you so hyped that it took years to polish the craft to get to that point. Just like reinvention is definitely a requirement to not only keep your growth alive and to keep it going, but also to make sure you don't get bored, because you don't want to be wood out here. We're not trees, we're humans.
Can you think of a moment? Could you? I mean, it's so many hours worth of conversations that you've had now. One of my questions is, how do you, the lessons that you're learning and the things that you're talking about, how do you internalize them? How do you make sure that you're not just having 900 conversations and they're not being adapted, and that you're not integrating them into what you do and you're not learning from them? How do you bring that into your life rather than just having 900 conversations that go by the wayside afterwards?
That's a good question. I never had that one before. Yeah. So for that one, note taking is huge. Note taking is definitely huge. Like when the final product comes out, there's usually, I want to say at least three, I want to say 3 to 10 points that I usually glean from interviews. Heck, even Pastor Travis Hall in his episode, I think he was episode 364, where his book was called The Seven Deadly Thought. And I thought, oh, I guess the seven deadly sins. He's a pastor. Like, oh no, it's actually seven deadly thoughts. And one of them was the thought of thinking that you have arrived. And that episode, like some episodes I go back to and listen to myself even years later still and still get things from it. And his episode is one of them because that's also gets in the way of your growth. That gets in the way of a good life of thinking once you get to a certain point that you've arrived. Like you can slack off, be lazier, like you can coast along and you'll be just fine when truth be told, that's not the case. Like if you've been religiously going to the gym at least 3 to 5 days out of the week, and then you miss 2 to 3 weeks, and then you get back in, like you're gonna feel the difference of what it means to miss that time in the gym, to miss that working out. It's gonna be painful as freaking heck, and that was from freaking experience. I'm like, dude, like I never need to do this again. I need to stay in freaking shape here, and that's the deadly thought of thinking, hey, I've arrived. I think I got this. I can relax a bit. It's like, nah, not really. So you have to be borderline obsessed at times of always wanting to get better in certain areas, in small areas. So definitely note taking is huge. Re-listening to past episodes is definitely huge. Heck, even especially in post production, where sometimes I'll go back and check out and see if there's any clips that stick out from certain episodes and repost them later. Heck, maybe turn to a blog post or use them for tweets, or yeah, they still call tweets on X,
Yeah.
whatever Elon Musk wants to call Twitter these days. And just really just going back and checking out certain episodes again and just really also keeping up with past guests on social media and resharing their posts and things like that. Because also, if you've been on the show like as a guest, usually you're gonna have a fan for life unless you do something really really stupid. I don't know what that is yet, but you're gonna have a fan for life from me.
Have you ever had a conversation with someone, and maybe before you've met them, maybe you didn't have the opportunity to read their book in full, maybe you've put them into a box and you've assumed they're going to be a certain sort of person, and you start talking to them, you're like, hold on a minute, you're kind of inspiring here. I need to go back and like you've actually shocked me. I was not expecting this. Have you had like nice surprises like that on your podcast?
I did. Funny enough, and this one still stick to me this day. Episode 221 with Dr. Ray Charles, not the musician, not the musician. Just a disclaimer.
Was that well?
The podcast's been around for 70 years. Ray Charles sadly passed before I could even interview him. But yeah, Dr. Ray Charles, like his episode about righteous leadership, because the thing was he talked about his backstory, and I met him through Toastmasters, and he was one of my mentors, but I never really got deep into his story. He's a giver, and funny enough, we're both born in the same month. He's a September 1st baby. I'm a September 6th baby. And thing about September babies that, hey, we're more of the givers. We don't really volunteer much information. But in the interview, he reminded me of his background as a doctor in biochemical engineering as well as risk assessment as well. Like I only knew about him from the pastor leadership side, like that side, the guy giving great sermons, praying over people, inspiring people, motivating people, sharing great deep stories, but the risk assessment part too. And he was able to combine both of those into one moment where he basically had to do some self-assessment and risk assessment on his own life because some of his friends and who were getting into their 40s were committing suicide and ending their lives too fast because they had great lives on the outside for the world to see, but on the inside they were struggling because they didn't have go-to people. And if you're the go-to person in your life for everyone else, who's your go-to person? And they didn't have that. And he noticed that a lot of those dark thoughts came in the darkest early parts of the morning, like 3 and 4 a.m., where sadly the act would happen where they would kill themselves. And he basically decided, okay, I was able to meet all these wonderful people. I'm going to have friends all over the globe that where, hey, if I can't reach Dominique at freaking 3 a.m. in the morning, I got a friend in China or Singapore or Australia I can contact where I could talk to them and talk me through the situation here and really just get my mind on something else, to do that risk assessment of having global mentors around the wonderful world. And that's one of the major things that still sticks out to me this day. And that interview happened probably about a couple more months before COVID started. That was the start of 2020, where everybody was on a high and like, yeah, this is going to be the best year ever. Like, we're going to take this 2020 vision thing and it's going to be a thing. We're going to be so cheesy, but it's going to be so great. And then things just got crazy. But yeah, like that interview sticks out to this day because I forgot how good he was in certain areas, and I forgot about the whole biochemical engineering and the risk assessment background of him. And that was a 50-minute conversation where a dude just went. And I probably, I think I think I still got probably like 20 points on that Word document, but just that piece about making sure that you as the go-to person have someone to go to in your life is also probably another facet for having a good life, because the thing is, like I mentioned earlier in the conversation, like, hey, we're social creatures. Yeah, we like our silence and boredom. We don't want to be around other people at times, especially if you recharge by yourself, but you still need other people.
Mm. You've mentioned mentors a couple of times now, and I did want to come to this because the original mentor would be a physical person that you would liaise with, you would meet, maybe you'd reach out to them, you could see that they are where you want to be, or they've got skills that you don't have and knowledge that they can impart to you if they're willing to trade their time for that. How much do you see, because you're a massive advocate for not only writing books, for reading books as well, can it be as powerful to learn from people who have passed, or other people, purely from picking up their books? And can you class that person as a mentor to you if you're taking the same lessons that you'd have learned if you'd have had the chance to speak to them yourself?
Yes, indeed. Books basically were my mentors. I wouldn't say they're my first mentors. I've had mentors officially and unofficially before that. Some just show up and I keep seeing them and they just want to talk, and I'm like, okay, I'll listen and see what I can get. As opposed to when I really got deep into books and was really especially heavy in my early guinea pig phase of personal development and self development and just really advancing. Like John Maxwell, and I've been blessed to meet him, and he's been even more inspirational in person. But his books, especially the 21 Qualities of a Leader, the indispensable qualities of a leader, it's a black, gold, and green book that's about 180, 90 pages. That's my favorite book of all time from him, because he goes through the different characteristics of a great leader: communication, charisma being another one of them, teamwork being another one. And a lesson in there that still sticks to me this day is one that he learned from his father, Dr. Melvin Maxwell, is how to walk slowly through the crowd. And his father was a pastor over a church as well as a chancellor over a university. And he basically had to make sure he was not only seen and heard, but also seen around campus. And he would learn about people, learn their names, take the time to know them, especially in his days as a pastor, getting to know his congregation, not only just praying over them, just setting aside that time of attention, like the eye to eye connection, the face to face connection, and just learning about them, seeing how I can help them, and just encouraging them. Like that still sticks to me to this day. And it's just that lesson alone, I believe, probably led to this conversation today. Because if I didn't walk slowly through the crowd, there have been certain opportunities I would have never gotten to advance in Toastmasters, or even got connections to eventually hiring a coach to make a quantum leap in life, to where it's like, oh, this guy's a fellow millennial. He's 2 years older than me, and he's got this wonderful book that's a page turner that I really enjoy, and it's about the same things I'm looking to learn. Like, let me learn from him, and eventually replicating that for myself and having multiple books of my own, and learning the fact and being humbled by the fact that folks saw me in action and were inspired to put their books out there and getting that hope to realize, like, hey, I don't need to write a 200-page book, especially in today's society where there's still a lot of folks that don't even want to touch a book. And if they do, they want to be short and to the point. And just being that inspiration for others. So, yeah, definitely, books are definitely mentors to me. Like, heck, even podcasts can be a mentor to other people, especially with hosts who have a wonderful, wonderful bank of content. Like you're building yours, my man, and you got a great bank already that's still growing. Like your episodes are at least 1 to 2 hours. So hey, that's a lot of content for a lot of people. And the thing is about time, you don't get it back. So like you're building your bricks, my man. You're building your castle, my man, with content. So yeah, podcasts can definitely be mentors, especially 5 years from now, if you're still doing this, seeing your growth. Like that can be an inspiration for others. So mentors don't have to be always face to face or on a Zoom call. They can be through podcasts. They can be through wonderful books and audiobooks too, if you don't like to sit down and make the time to read.
I like that. And I do particularly like that answer of walking slowly through the crowd, because it's not always easy. Like yourself, a lot of the time I will edge towards the introverted, and your life is easier if you run past people and don't give them time. Sometimes you talk to people, it brings problems. Sometimes it brings work. And sometimes you just want to bury your head and get away from it. But being visible, being accessible, walking slowly through the crowd, it opens up possibilities. It opens up conversations. It opens up a lot of things. But you have to do it. You have to buy into it.
Heck yeah, gotta buy to it indeed. Shoot, if you don't, someone might buy you metaphorically. Not in the way you like, they'll buy your time and your attention.
So getting back to the getting back to the art of making a book happen. For you, what is the hardest thing about writing a book?
The hardest thing about writing the book, I'd have to say the curse of the weight of understanding. And what I mean by that is that my first book, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I wrote the book on a dare. I was given a year to get it done because I was giving these talks, I was networking with people, and instead of business cards, I handed out reading lists to people known as the 100 Books for Dynamic Living. And great concept and great idea as a product for folks who wanted to buy that at the time. And one lady, she looked at me, looked at the list, and was like, "Hey, so where's your name on this list, buddy?" And it's like, "Hey, it's on there. It's Don Brightmon, numbers 443." And she's like, "No, I'm not talking about your contact info. I'm talking about your name as an author on this list, buddy." And I'm like, "Well, I'm freaking 20, freaking 2, about 23. I got nothing to talk about. Shoot, hell, I got to talk about." And she dared me to write a book, and she even dared me to, or she even offered to join me in the dare. And at first, I was like, that seems way too far off, way too far off for me right now. I'm like, dude, I'm, my story's still being told and written at the same time. Like, what the hell am I going to talk about? And did some soul searching and eventually found it. And then basically was able to still accept the dare. And that deadline was able to put a dead end on procrastination to get that book done in 10 months, and was able to be like, hey, going north, tips and techniques to advance yourself. Pick it up today, folks. It's good stuff. To where after that, it's like, yeah, I'm going to have part 2 ready. Like, I'm going to do this quote book, and I'm going to do the follow-up book. It's going to be freaking great. And then when I started writing towards the second book, some days it would just be harder than others, because it's like, dude, because after Going North was published, I had about a good, this was late 2018. Yeah, it was probably 2018 where I've had multiple attempts to where to try to get to the finish line with Stay the Course, the eventual follow-up to Going North. And the problem is that I've interviewed probably about a good 50, close to 100 people who've had way bigger followings than me, way more powerful like stories and all this other stuff going on, some millionaires and all this other stuff. And I'm like, dude, what the hell am I going to do what the hell am I gonna? What am I looking like writing about elite performance? And I've talked to some elite performers out there who've done way more than me, and it took a lesson actually from an ancient, wonderful book known as the Bible, and where Christ in the New Testament told his disciples that they would do greater works than him. And for those familiar with Jesus, they're like, hey, how are you going to do greater works than that guy? Dude basically fed 5,000 people, turned water into wine, raised a dude from the dead. Like, the heck is he talking about? And eventually, his main disciple, Peter, the most outspoken one, actually was able to lead more people to a better life afterwards. Funny enough, it was recorded in Acts after the death of Christ and his resurrection. After all of that happened, Peter was left behind to basically be the main messenger of that message of, hey, salvation awaits if you change your life. And thousands of people had their lives changed afterwards. And myself, it's like, hey, these folks may have more powerful stories than me. They may have lived more life than me. But there are some people that I can reach that they can't reach, like right here in my own neighborhood. And even though they may have powerful stories, some of those foundational lessons never change. And that helped me to keep writing and to keep going forward. And eventually in 2019, that book was published. And that was about a good 2 years after the first one was published. And I thought, all right, I think I got it now. And now I'm in the part where it's like, all right, I got to write book 5 now. Problem is, curse of knowledge is supposed to help people start a podcast. It's like, dude, this has been a monkey on my back since middle 2020. It gets great progress, then no progress, then more progress than no progress. So I'm probably about a good, I want to say 65% there for the book itself. We shall see, because at first it was an elephant. There's going to be book writing and podcasting, but now it's going to be separate. There's going to be a book about the podcasting process, then the book writing process, then combine them, as opposed to me trying to eat this giant elephant of everything. So the curse of knowledge is definitely real, but the good news is that I have a lot of thoughts, and I usually try to get them down on my phone as a voice note, or even open up a Google Drive and just put that thought down for later, because you have to ink it when you think it. When the thought comes to mind, you have to really ink it when you think it. You have to capture it, because if you don't, it'll be like a fish getting the worm, and they were able to get away and they swim even deeper down away from you. Like, oh, I got my worm. They almost took me alive, but I survived. Like, you don't want your idea to do that. And then you hear later, like, hey, I had that idea. So yeah, ink it when you think it, my friends.
Ink it when you think it. And is book 5 going to be the best yet?
It will be. It will be, because even though the curse of knowledge is a good thing and a bad thing, because hey, you know things. Bad thing is it kind of slows down some of your action taking. It's going to be the best yet, because the thing is, I'm a better writer than what I was 7 years ago, which I still can't believe. It's been 7. Actually, it's been 8 years since my first book, which is still crazy to me. And I've gotten more confidence since then. I've lived a little more life since then. It's definitely going to be a lot better, a lot bigger than the first one for sure.
And you've mentioned on this podcast that there is a subset, a new generation that may be allergic to touching books. That might not be the way they learn. That might not be the way they pull lessons from history. They advance themselves, they grow. What 3 lessons? I mean, you said millennials, but maybe even the next generation, Gen X, Gen Z. What 3 lessons or what 3 skills would you say are the most important for the next generation to learn and develop themselves?
Yeah, you got a good point, man. I have to start calling that question the Gen. I have to put Gen X in that. I mean, Gen Z in that question.
I'm a millennial and I'm 40.
Exactly. It's like, dude, like millennials aren't even like freaking 1925 anymore. It's like we're freaking 33, 40. It's like, oh, well, dang. Anyways, the 3 skills. I'd have to say the tree of communication is definitely one. And the reason why I say tree is because there are so many branches under communication. Public speaking being the biggest branch of that tree because that will give you an edge. If you're able to get out there and talk to people, that'll put you over the edge. It helped me to advance in the library world, being able to be outspoken and get the fact out there that I can communicate. Body language, that's another thing, especially nowadays where a lot of communications via text and virtual and heck even depending on the situation, sometimes the dating world can be a little bit of a cesspool depending on where you are and what you're looking for. You kind of have to try to find a flounder in a sea of catfish. But body language is definitely another one, putting you at an edge with that one. Also, written communication. There's a quote by Ben Franklin that says that writing leads to wealth. And that is actually true. Like, if you're able to truly communicate and write to where folks can clearly understand you and you know how to write and communicate among professionals, among business folks, entrepreneurs, and not just the emojis and smiley faces and the TTYLs, even though that's not even a popular acronym or abbreviated term anymore. I don't even know all the terms these days, but like being able to get your thoughts clearly across through written word and written form will definitely put you over the edge because writing will always be in high demand. It'll always be in high demand. So communication is the first skill. Being able to communicate to a group of people, whether it's 5 or 500. Body language, being able to take a good read upon people, reading great books on that. I know Joe Navarro, he's got great content out there
Mm.
on reading body language. I
What
forgot the author's
everybody is
name.
saying, I've literally just listened to that recently.
Yep.
Yeah.
There we go. We're on the same page. Yeah. See, you're already doing it. And of course, the written language. So that'll be the first one under the communication tree. The second
Mm.
one would be financial literacy because that is such a high demand skill for life. Like, I was lucky to have a class called consumer math my senior year in high school because I went to a different school, like went to a Christian high school. Like, I was lucky. Like most schools these days, at least in the US of A, they don't teach that. It's like, dude, I don't want to know about a dang trapezoid and figure out the degrees. Like, dude, how do I do these freaking taxes so the IRS will be nice to me and not send me a letter, bro? Like, teach me that. Like,
They
I'm
taught
gonna
you
need to
that in
know
high
that
school.
information. Exactly. Like, dude, like that's the thing I should know. So, financial literacy is the second thing, and the third and final skill is being able to create and maintain and build relationships, especially with folks who are have high value in their lives, like those who actually are really progressive in life, doing great things. Like this podcast is a great tool for that. My man Alex is building it up brick by brick, and have his whole castle very, very soon in a few months after all those interviews you're doing. Like my podcast itself, like I some of the conversations I had with people, it's like, dude, never in a million years that I think I'd be meeting some of the people I've had on the show, and like it's been one heck of a gift. So if you could be a master of communication, have a good grasp of what it means to have your finances in order, and being able to network effectively with people, especially high value people, you'll definitely put yourself over the edge.
Mm. That's really interesting. Let's flip now to crappy to happy and the four keys of rock solid optimism. I can just tell. Look, it doesn't take like 3 seconds of listening to you on a podcast or anything that you're just super optimistic in all circumstances. What are your four keys for someone who's not? For someone who is either pessimistic or a bit just can't reframe things naturally to the best positive outcome. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, to those people, those wonderful four keys. The first one is R for reading, reading great material. And that doesn't even have to be a whole book. It can be a series of quotes, inspirational quotes. Like, I've amassed a whole chest of quotes, positive quotes to keep me motivated. In addition to all the books that I've read in the past that I just highlighted in the past. So being able to read great material. Key number two is audio immersion. For those listening to this wonderful show, you're doing just that. You're immersing yourself in great audio that's going to help build you up, encourage you, help you learn yourself something, for a lack of a better term. The third key, the V, visual stimulation. If you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to subscribe to this wonderful podcast. Like, hey, you're doing key number three, where you're actually giving your eyes something to watch. Heck, even my past, when I was doing Taekwondo, I would watch certain YouTube videos in addition to the practicing and going to classes at least 3 times a week. So that way I would polish my craft in the martial arts. So being able to make sure that your education time supersedes your entertainment time. And the E is encouragement, encouraging yourself and other people. Because if you're living and breathing, you need encouragement. And that goes for everyone, and especially yourself. Because, hey, the main real estate that you have is your body and everything that's in it, your soul and your mind. And you're going to have to encourage yourself to keep going. So those are those
Mhm.
four wonderful keys for rock solid optimism, because this acrostic came to me from writing my first book when I was in a Starbucks. And I'm like, dude, like I got to think of something like, how do I systematize what the heck I'm doing? And these four letters personified. Every day I'm reading something good for at least 5 minutes. Every day I'm listening to something that inspires me, that educates me, or just gets me pumped up, like listening to music. I'm a little bit eclectic in my style. I'll listen to jazz, acid jazz, R&B, rap, even some metal. Visual stimulation, YouTube. Like YouTube is basically my TV. Like I really don't use my TV unless I'm taking an occasional break to play like Xbox or PlayStation every now and then. And that's a rarity these days. And the encouragement, internal goal to encourage at least 5 people a day. That's one of my major goals. So resharing certain posts, maybe shooting someone a message, especially if it's their birthday, happy birthday message, complimenting somebody. Like it's part of my being now to where I don't even have to keep count anymore. Like I set that challenge for myself years ago, and now it's just something that I've been doing for so long now. It's basically second nature to encourage someone and to share something positive with someone, because we all need it, especially nowadays where, especially with you being 40, you probably understand the fact that it feels like time is moving at 90 miles per hour when we're supposed to be in a 30-mile-per-hour zone.
Don't, I'll be 50 before I know it. See, you've obviously had, you've mentioned it already, the Bible being an influence for you. With these four key rules that you sort of stick to, where else have you been influenced apart from books potentially? Are there other philosophies? Are there mentors? Where do you think you've got to this, or was it purely your journey of writing that first book and just learning what not to do almost?
Yeah, heck, I'm even though I'm a Christian, I do study other religions too, because at the end of the day, when you read other religious texts, some of them overlap. Like being kind to others, like basically that's something that's darn near in almost every religion, almost. Like you can find that in
Mhm.
any religious book. Heck, even like being like water, the classic Bruce Lee thought. Being like water, my friends. Like, hey, when it's in the cup, it's a cup. When it's in the jug, it's a jug. When it gets on rocks long enough, the rock will erode. Like water can be darn near anything it wants to be. Like applying that to my own life, and heck, maybe even being a bit of a chameleon of sorts and getting into certain areas and communicating with people and being funny. Heck, even listening to comedians. Funny enough, Bill Burr, one of my favorite comedians going right now, dude is freaking hilarious. Some may find him offensive, but I find him freaking hilarious. Like his podcast itself, especially some of the clips on there. Like he's one of my role models for not being a monotonous speaker, as opposed like the Ben Stein Clear Eyes commercial. For those in the US of A who remembers the 90s, was like, yeah, Clear Eyes, Ben Stein. Like just talking the same tone for out, I don't know, shoot. The commercial's 30 seconds and a talk with a boring professor, that could be freaking 40, 30 minutes. Like, not to be that guy, just being able to use intonation at a different tone throughout a whole conversation, taking you up higher, taking you a little lower, maybe to a little whisper, almost like a 50 Cent, in a way to where it's like, oh, they have to actually lean in and pay attention to you more because they can't hear. And it's like, hey, that's kind of like the mystique of it. And that's the other thing too, just being around certain things too, where it's like, hey, you're either influencing others or you're being influenced. And if I'm going to be influenced, I'd rather be by something that'll help me to advance and grow, whether it's a small level or a big level.
Mm. With all these things, and like you said for yourself, there is a level of selfishness. Like I'm selfishly getting to talk to all these inspiring people, learning lessons. Hopefully, if people learn from this and they listen to this and they watch this and they take it for themselves, but there's always going to be a level of selfishness because I want to talk to these people. I find it really interesting to delve into the mind. And like you say, maybe you ask a question that they've never been asked or never divulged on a podcast before, and you get a little bit of gold that you weren't expecting. But I'm going to ask you about podcasting because that is what you do. The 3 R's of producing podcast content purely from a selfish level. I hope others get the benefit of your wisdom. But I'm curious on this one, purely for myself now.
Sure thing. The 3 R's for podcasting are record, revise, release. Record, revise, release. Record great content. You're doing it, my friend. You're doing it now. Revise. You've done that. You've got great clips on YouTube that I've caught. Like, you're reusing your past content, and as well as release as well. You're releasing into the world because, heck, I'm familiar. I actually know a guy who has some great recordings with some people. Sadly, really famous people. Some of them who sadly passed away, and he still hasn't launched that darn podcast yet. He's been sitting on that content for years, and I'm like, dude. Like, I know there's some episodes I haven't released yet. Some of them because, well, that episode was bad. And there's some folks who may catch one episode of one of our shows be like, man, like, that wasn't one of your best, but it's like, if you got episodes you haven't released still dumb, then that poster must have been really bad. But yeah, man, like, releasing that great content to the world, like, hey, it's not good enough to just record, even though that's a great start. It's even better to release, learn to ship. One of my favorite Guy Kawasaki quotes, just learn to ship. You're shipping out great content. If you're a podcast listening to this and you stick to a game plan, you stay consistent, you learn to ship, you ship out your wonderful, wonderful episodes and put them out into the world like you're doing it. And not only releasing it, but also revising as well, where it's like, all right, I got this content. How can I repurpose this? One of the most beautiful things about AI these days is that there's tools that can help you create multiple pieces of content. Like with my show, I'm able to create at least 10 pieces of content alone just from one episode. Like Instagram clips, those wonderful audiograms, tweets can count as content posts, Facebook posts, LinkedIn blog articles, heck, even Medium blog articles. One of these days I'll revive my Medium. Heck, even since my show is about authors, like being able to have the show notes from episodes go into the Goodreads platform as an RSS feed to really point them towards the authors themselves, and just so on and so forth. Heck, even eventually, one of these days when I make the time to focus, there's going to be a book based off the podcast itself. Like, there's probably at least 3 books minimum that can come from the Going North podcast. That could be 200 pages each. And just that is repurposing. So record, revise, release. Record your great content, revise it, edit it, and also create multiple pieces of content from it, and then release it out into the world. And it's circular. It's like the circle of life. You got to really keep doing it in the space, and also have something to point to with your podcast as well, because one thing I do like to recommend for aspiring podcasts is that, hey, anyone can do one. Should you do one? Well, that the jury's out on that, depending on what your goal is. But you should have a product to sell, in my opinion, if you have a podcast. If you're not doing it just from the hobby standpoint, like my podcast, it points back to my books, my speaking. and executive coaching. Like it points all towards that, and not only just helping others to promote themselves as well. So just have an end in mind, a goal in mind for your show, and you can definitely do it.
Brilliant. Thank you. Now, you've mentioned it, you've touched on it just there. So you're writing, you're podcasting, you're coaching. This is quite a busy life. Do you lean on any levels of mindfulness to blow off some steam and just not be thinking about it? Because like you said, there's so many different social media platforms. You could be constantly either creating content, doing something. You need to switch off at times or else you'll just drive yourself crazy, quite frankly. Do you lean on mindfulness? You've already mentioned positive affirmations. I'd probably class that as a little bit of mindfulness. Do you lean on anything else like breath work or meditation or mindful eating, whatever it is? Does that play any role in your life right now?
It plays an egg role in my life right now, indeed. Let me stop. But yeah, mindfulness does play a role. I use my alarm clock app as a way to give myself 5 minutes of silence every day when I first get up out of bed, because the thing is, you have to check in with yourself before you check in on the world. Especially some folks like to watch the news when they first get up. I don't like to watch the news, period, especially if it's the start of the day. Like, yeah, I don't need no propaganda to start off a day or hearing about the sad, tragic loss of someone being killed. Like, I don't need to hear that at the start of my day. It's like, nah, we ain't doing that, fam. So, using my alarm clock app to set it for 5 minutes, if I feel like I got extra time, or if it's one of those days where I don't have to don't have to rush to another location, it may go for 10 to 15 minutes where it's just silence, where I just sit with myself and my thoughts. That way and get myself situated, and also pray and give thanks for another day to be alive. And then also at night, I am a big fan of Victoria Gallagher's Believe app, and it has a bunch of wonderful guided meditations and affirmations. Heck, even Allison J.K., who I absolutely love, who was also a guest on the show, her wonderful audio clearings, like, I'd have to say that's probably it in a way. It's like programming in a way. It's because the thing is, she has a few dedicated to certain areas of life, like some for success, some for more self love and self confidence. And it's like you don't have to repeat what she's saying. You just have to sit and listen to it. And it's best to actually sit and listen to it when you're about to go to sleep, because when I first came across those clearings, like, I was right here in the same chair and I was listening, and then out of nowhere, I was knocked out, and I came to, and I'm like, "Hey, wait a second, where'd the dang 30 minutes go to?" So, yeah, man. So it's good stuff. So when it comes to bedtime, I listen to some of the clearings from her too, just to really keep my mind programmed on something good, on something focused, on keeping the confidence at an even higher level than what it already is. So mindfulness is huge. Like, you got to take care of your software. You definitely got to. You got to take care of your body. Like, mindfulness is definitely required. It doesn't have to be as big as shaving your head and putting on an orange robe and seeking out a monastery. You don't have to do all that. Like, you can do it right where you are. Just find a quiet corner, even if it's for 15 minutes a day, like doing something you truly enjoy. If you're a busybody with the whole family, where it's like, all right, mommy or daddy's got to go to the thinking chair, like setting a corner, just having a chair for thought or whatever. And it's like, oh, if they're in that chair, don't bother them.
Oh, Dom, this has been fascinating. I've still got the quick fire round if you've still got a bit of time. Is there anything that we haven't spoken about that you thought might come up that you'd like to mention to the listeners? Is there anything you thought we'd cover on here that we haven't?
Oh, nah, man, sure. It's been great, dude. Been a while since I had a long form, hour-long podcast. Most of mine have been like 30, 45 minutes. So this has been great, man. Shoot. Ask away,
That's
man.
good. So of all the guests I've had so far, this is the one that feels the silliest question to ask and almost impossible for you to answer. But what book would you give to a young person if you wanted them to live a good life?
And I thought
One
you were
book.
going to
No,
ask me.
you can have as many as you want. If you were to go back to 18 or 16-year-old Dom or a Gen Z person now, and you're like, right, you're setting out in your life, you've got a level of education, these 2 or 3 books, let's say, I'll spread it out for you, I'll make it a little bit easier for you. Which 2 or 3 books would you give to that person and say, this is a fantastic starting point and this will start your growth journey?
Sure thing. The 21 Qualities of a Leader by John Maxwell. That's book number 1. Still my favorite
Mm-hmm.
to this day. Easy read. Book number 2, I'd say Anything You Want by Derek Sivers. And book number 3, it doesn't have to be the whole book, but I'd say the book of Proverbs from the Holy Bible itself. You can probably even buy just the book of Proverbs on Amazon somewhere.
They're the best. And Derek Shivers, I've heard the name, I'm not too familiar. What sort of content is that?
Yeah, he's the founder of cdbaby.com. Funny enough, he's probably one of my recommended books for those wanting to start a show who wants to figure out where they want their theme to be. Because CD Baby was a site built for independent musicians only to sell their work and their music and to get it out there. And he was able to sell it, I think I'm not sure it was $1 billion, but yeah, just making sure it was all about independent artists, even if the big artists wanted to get on CD Baby. He was like, nope, independent musicians only, buddy.
Okay. What was your biggest light bulb moment where you learned something really important about yourself?
That was when I was in. That was probably when I was in college, and I was naturally able to smile more, and I was getting more smiles from people than frowns. Definitely, because high school, the shy kid, and kept to himself for the most part. Had a couple friends, but on the inside, my default, I guess, as a defense mechanism, like somewhat having a scowl on the face.
You had the resting bitch face where it's just like,
Yeah, exactly. No barking though, so that's the good news.
Of all the skills that you've developed, which one do you consider to be the most important?
Definitely active listening. I was gonna say public speaking, but I've gained more from listening than talking.
As will most people if they think about it. What's your best and worst habits?
Wow. Okay. Best habit, reading. Worst habit, not always sticking to my time of getting to bed on time. Sometimes I'm in the middle of listening to a podcast or something, and then it'd be like freaking 12:33 a.m. when I was like, I'm supposed to be to bed at 12. So yeah, I'm not always perfect on that front.
Well, now, the next question is what keeps you up at night? But apart from listening to podcasts, what keeps you up at night?
Wow. I'd have to say definitely shoot. What keeps me up at night? Funny enough, it's usually podcasts. Wow. And not just listening, but also editing as well for laughs and giggles. But shoot. Shoot. I guess YouTube. Like that's a rabbit hole within itself. Like random shorts of random facts and factoids. Like I wouldn't say I'm a big fan of Bleach, but I do like Bleach, like that wonderful anime about a. Well, what I'm about
Bleach?
to say may not. Yeah, it's this anime about this teenage boy who actually becomes a soul reaper, where he helps souls to find peace.
You watch that late into the late hours.
Oh, that's just one of them. There's a whole list: Outlaw Star, Trigun, Cowboy Bebop, Dragon Ball Z. Like, there's a bunch of other ones.
Fair enough. If somebody wanted to take one step towards living a good life, what would you tell that person to do?
I'd have to say, definitely take action after reading good books.
Take action.
Yep, make sure it's intentional too. I kind of cheated on that one, but that was what came to mind.
That works. And finally, who in your life should we talk to next if we want to live a good life?
I'd have to say my buddy, Dr. Michael D. Finkley from South Carolina. Definitely him. He was episode 900 of the show, and he took part of a Grammy-nominated music album that's going to be nominated for a Grammy. And he had a radio DJ. His mom was a radio DJ, and he hosts a show called The Michael Finkley Show. And I had him on episode 900, and he's been on a media blitz right now because he's from a small town in South Carolina that's in the south part of the USA for the international listeners. So that he's kind of like a big deal in his city for being a small town country boy who eventually was able to take the lessons and wonderful wisdom from his parents and make something out of himself, and to still make something out of himself. And he's a millennial like you and I. I think he's like 36. So yeah.
Okay, I like that. Dom, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I will include links below to all of the episodes that you've mentioned, all of the books that you've mentioned, so people can follow your words of wisdom and read the ones that they're interested in. If people want to find you online, work with you, be coached by you, where's the best place to find you online?
Sure thing. Well, thanks, Alex, for having me on your podcast. And man, I've enjoyed the conversation. Your questions are really insightful, which I really appreciate, and some that I haven't even answered yet, where it's like, oh, I think, but I actually had to really think, and appreciate you for that, my man. And for those who want to follow yours truly, just head over to Brightmon.com. All things Dom are there. And if you want to follow me on social medias, everything is going to be at Dom Brightmon, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Blue Sky, LinkedIn. It's going to be all Dom Brightmon.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dom. Thank you for coming on.
Woohoo! Thanks for having me, Alex. That's right, dude. I'm a good life bee now. I'm in the hive with you.
I'm snipping that. I'm definitely snipping that. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. Just before you scroll on, please do give it a like and share. And if you're new around here, do subscribe, and we will see you in the next one. Cheers.